You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. Available online at theroute.wordpress.com and on YouTube.
All right, welcome into a special edition podcast here on this, believe it or not, we're recording this on a Monday here, November the 16th. Ryan Swanigan with you, Brent Bonflor, and Devin Cleach will be joining me for the second podcast coming your way here on our Facebook page, Twitter, as well as our website, theroute2.wordpress.com. Right now, though, I am joined by former Delay of Game host Amsley Senkbeil. A continuing trend here this weekend. We had Michael Snow on our Sunday podcast. Now Amsley joins me here today, as I said yesterday, as she would, and she has thankfully followed through and joins me. And
Yes.
glad to have you on the podcast finally here, Amsley.
I know. I've been thinking about that. I am happy to be here with you. It's a pleasure.
If only we were discussing, I guess, a little bit lighter circumstances. But I bring Amsley on because, of course, those of you who remember Amsley from Delay of Game, and literally a year ago, Amsley was in France at this time studying abroad in Grenoble.
You're so close.
I'm always close. I never get it right, though.
It's Grenoble.
Right. Which
Or
is,
for English language, it would be Grenoble.
right. And I guess we'll start right there. How far away is it from Paris itself?
It's about a 2-hour train ride.
Okay.
And so Paris is pretty central France. You look at the map of the country, and Paris is pretty much smack dab in the middle. Grenoble would be in the southeastern corner, so very close to Switzerland and Italy, right on that border.
Right. Okay. So, of course, I mentioned in our podcast yesterday, I don't exactly enjoy getting political. I don't enjoy talking politics and whatnot. But the events that took place over the weekend in France that not just affected, the music industry. This attack really affected all sorts of aspects of life, not just the political scene, the restaurant scene. It was also the music industry. France and Germany, the soccer match that took place there in Paris, that was affected. And it really...
And other sports complexes.
Yeah.
I mean, they talked about for the NFL just yesterday, that being NFL Sunday, mentioned that there's higher security here in the States, that those sports complexes now have been affected by these attacks.
Yeah, and the fallout from this has just been really incredible to see as far as the heightened security, not just in Europe, but really all across the globe. And as you just mentioned here in the United States with college football games, with the NFL and proceeding forward. But I want to start first with the actual unfortunate 3-hour attack itself and really just get your reaction to it. What was it when you started to find out what was going on there and the events that were unfolding in Paris?
Absolutely. So I was actually... I was home when I first received an alert from a national news station that said attacks in Paris. They know that 20 have been killed. This is a developing story. And immediately I went back to the attacks at Charlie Hebdo and how that was if you remember back in December, it was right before Christmas. It was what they called the terrorist attacks against this satirical magazine. And so my mind went right back to those attacks, and I went, oh my gosh, not again. I'm curious what it was or who it was on, all this different stuff. And then, I mean, not even 2 minutes later, I'm on Twitter, and it is, I wish I had a better description, but it blew up. And so I'm seeing it escalate from 15 to 20 civilians killed, to then it rose to 50, to then it was 75, to then it was just around 100, and then it was, I believe, an hour later, then it finally got to the number of 120. And so from there, you knew that it wasn't a random shooting. It wasn't a one business. This was
an isolated incident.
Yes, exactly. It wasn't that. It was instead a master plan to go after the most populated areas of Paris. And that was what was released. It was the soccer stadium. It was specific parts of Paris, quote unquote, like downtown, but there isn't really a downtown Paris. Instead, it's the busiest districts. And so they secluded that, going into restaurants, and then finally took in a hostage situation at a theater, which was also highly populated. I believe they had about 100 civilians inside of this theater. So to kind of go back to your first initial question, how did it develop? One, very quickly, and two, very high numbers. And so I mean, to be completely honest, I teared up. My heart went right back to Paris. And what was extremely ironic and just so heartbreaking to me is that earlier I was looking on my Facebook, and you know how, or earlier that day, and you know how now Facebook has gotten in the trend of, we think we should share your memories, and this is what happened a year ago or 5 years ago. Well, for me, that day, I was on a monument. It was actually l'Arc de Triomphe, and I had a selfie with the Eiffel Tower in the background. So November 13th of 2014, I was in Paris. And then for all of this to happen a year ago that day.
That's incredible.
Is just, I mean, I still get chills about it. And so that's where I was put in that situation. It wasn't me in the States going, oh my gosh, poor Paris. It was me going, I was there. I was in that same exact spot. And so it was just a swirl of emotions that I'm still trying to get over. But kind of looking on the brighter side, I reached out to friends that I made in France. I reached out to my host family, and thankfully they were all safe. Those that were both in Paris at the time and in Grenoble. And so kind of looking on that bright side of things, those that I knew and that I was close with were all accounted for and safe.
Yeah, that was my next question is I know you made quite a few friends there in Paris and in France. And my question to you was, you know, how were they? How were their emotions? Were they safe, etc.? How are they? I can't even imagine how they're reacting and trying to get through this over there, because they are there front and center. This is their backyard essentially, and it happened in their backyard. How are they? I guess how are they doing moving forward with this? I mean, have you heard any of their reaction to what France's reaction to ISIS has been, which is, you know, the strategic bombings in Syria and northwest Iraq?
You know, I haven't heard anything about how they're responding to the now airstrikes, but their initial reaction, actually, my host sister, Berenice, I reached out to her the night that the attacks had happened, and she was not aware of the severity. She had seen, I think on Twitter and on Facebook, you know, there is an attack in Paris, we're still developing. But at that point in time, which it would have been about 12:30 in the morning for France, she was quite honestly getting ready for bed. She didn't know much, just kind of said, you know, I'm safe, my friends are safe, but there's not much more to it. To then the next morning, we were talking again, and her heart, I could just tell, was aching. She goes, I had no idea that this attack was to that severity. But again, she said that she was safe, her friends and her family were safe, and then the friends that I made outside of my host family, there were two that I know for sure that were in Paris during the attacks, and they actually that same night posted that they were okay, that they had found safety, that they were back in their apartments or with their friends or whatnot. And so it was more along the lines of them reaching out and letting everyone else know that they're okay. And then it wasn't anything angry. It was more, this is my home, and I'm going to stand up, quote unquote, by showing how much I love and how much that we are all going to come together in this time of grieving, similar to what the Americans did with 9/11. Yeah. And yes, of course, everyone is going to be very angry and how dare you and why would you go to these barbaric attacks in the aspect, but also let me show you that I can quote unquote kill you with kindness, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I definitely understand. Getting to the sports aspect of this, there was a soccer game that was going on, a huge soccer game between Germany and France taking place. The attacks happened in the middle of that match, and yet it continued with the French president there. Of course, he was later evacuated. Right. What did you think of that? Because I mean, it really is just shocking to think that something of that magnitude, a sporting event of that magnitude, would continue to go on despite everything else that was going on in Paris. Now, granted, it was kind of separated from where the rest of the attacks were happening to the southeast of the stadium, but it was still in a vast area of Paris itself. What do you think of that?
Well, I guess, to be honest, I wasn't paying much attention to the sports aspect of it. Did they finish the game? Because did they? Okay. Then I must have been misinformed because I had thought that it went on for a little longer and then they got word of how severe the attacks were and then they stopped it before it ended. But I must have been misinformed. But to hear that it still went on is, I think, yes, shocking, absolutely, since the attacks did happen in the stadium, or some of them. But at the same time, kind of a stick it to you. Like, you can't, and I believe that it was the suicide bombers that were inside of the stadium, correct?
Yeah. No, they were outside of the stadium, but they were literally right outside the stadium.
And so maybe it's wrong of me to say, but I think that maybe the officials or the president of the soccer clubs went, you're not, soccer is very, very important in Europe. And so I think that if it would have been a flee and a running because you are so afraid, which, yes, is granted in these situations, then that may have shown more of a weakness. And so since it did not happen on the field or in a certain section, that they went, we are going to stick it to you and we are going to finish this match because that is who we are. But also, think about this. If the attacks are happening outside of the stadium, where are you most safe?
Probably inside the stadium.
Inside of the stadium. And so then that as well, for those that don't have service, because unless you have a European phone, you must connect to Wi-Fi to have any sort of service. And so then maybe some of those people in the stadium didn't know. And so you might have heard something outside, but that people might imagine that being all sorts of things. And so then you go, well, if one, not many people are informed of what's going on, then number two, we're going to keep the majority of these people inside because that's where they're most safe. And three, why not use the excuse of, we're going to stick it to you. We're not going to run afraid. Instead, we're going to finish this match because we want to make a statement.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the really, I want to say shocking, but it's also difficult to wrap your brain around it because they kept on going. I think it was about, I want to say maybe about minute 66, 67, somewhere in there when the explosion happened.
Right.
So you've still got about roughly less than 30 minutes of soccer left to be played.
Yeah.
And for that to continue on after the point where the explosion happened, and you hear, of course, the Vine that was making the rounds on the news networks and social media of the explosion happening in the middle of the match.
Right.
It just is, it's so incredible to think that they just continued playing. They played through that. They played through what was going on.
Well, and you're curious who made the executive decision.
With the French president there as well.
Right, absolutely.
Just absolutely incredible. The larger perspective of things that I talked about yesterday in our rant was when politics and sports get mixed together, it really I guess it really gets real, and you realize that sports isn't really, it's big, but sometimes it's not big enough to overshadow the events that happen in real life. But it also is a place for people to go, and I guess something for people to rally around and build strength. Do you think that will happen with the people of France in Paris after these attacks, knowing that the music industry was involved, and when the music industry is involved, they always strengthen, they always get strong, they rally together, they band together, and they continue to press on and be strong. Does the sports industry have a greater calling, do you think, with rallying people and strengthening them and making them feel empowered to overcome something like this that's that's filled with such sorrow?
I think absolutely. Again, you look back at the 9/11 attacks, and during that time there was a was it the World Series and it was in
about a month later. Yeah,
and it was
October.
in Yankee Stadium because they had postponed the games and everything, and then it goes back to Yankee Stadium, and you look at that. There's a documentary. I wish I could remember the name.
It's a 30 for 30 film.
Right, it is.
About George W. Bush's first pitch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And you look at that and how the sports fans rallied from that event, connecting it with 9/11. I mean, it was empowering. You get chills. People are crying. Yes, sports have an exponential impact, I believe, behind these sort of tragic attacks. And kind of like what we just mentioned, the soccer game going on, I think, speaks volumes to this. Because, again, I wish I knew who had made the executive decision and why, but I think that if it was intentional or not, it speaks volumes that this game went on. Kind of like what I just said, like, you can't take us down. You can try, but you're not going to. And so I think then when the next match is held in this stadium, you will see the signs that says, "We are Paris." You will see the signs that say, like, you can't take us. You can't kill us. We are one, and we are powerful. And it is through this sports event. So I think absolutely. And you mentioned the music. Spotify then had the France flag behind all of their music beds. And so that just in itself, that little act, every time that somebody would open the Spotify app, would be reminded of these incidents. And they would go, yes, like, I stand behind Paris and I am with Paris. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you were exactly right, that the music industry can do a lot, and that sports, absolutely, hands down, I don't know why they wouldn't. And I mean, you look at, oh goodness, what team was it? There was a basketball player for the NBA that shaved the back of his head.
I did see that
said Paris.
Yeah, and I can't remember who it is, but I did see it.
Right, and so whether it's overseas in France or whether it's here in the States, yes, sports will have a big influence on the Paris attacks.
We saw multiple football teams running out onto the field.
Moments of silence all over with the Paris or with the France flag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the U.S. flag as well as they ran onto the field.
And you saw President Obama declared for all flags to be flown at half-staff for remembrance of what happened in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Going forward, I know there's, of course, now heightened security, concerns of more attacks from ISIS as time goes on. We don't have the World Cup going on yet, but we're closing in on it. We have well less than a year left until Rio in 2016 in June into July. Do you think there's more concern going forward with soccer matches that will happen? I mean, you've got the Olympics coming up next year as well. Mm-hmm. It's all just coming together with so many big events. Now, granted, it's in South America, and it seems as if South America has a history of avoiding things. They managed to stay out of I guess, the trouble of the world that happens in Europe and the Middle East and Africa. They managed to stay out of it. Can that continue on? And can, I guess, the people of Europe who attend future soccer matches, like in Germany, in Poland, in Russia, England, Spain, etc., can they feel safe knowing that the ISIS threat is very, very real now, especially after what just happened in Friday? Can people go on feeling safe and knowing that they're protected and that nothing bad will happen to them?
That's an amazing question, and I wish I had an answer for it, because I have no idea. And you look at not only travel in Europe from one European country to the next, whether that's France to Spain or France to Italy or you name it, but also the United States. And again, I'm sorry, but I'm resorting back to 9/11, because after that, the security within the airports it heightened to a whole new level. And we all know it and we feel it today. But you think about the international airports, take Chicago, for instance. Heathrow already has this extensive security platform in place. So will it be risen again? And I think yes. I think you have to. I think that international travel itself is very scary.
Heathrow in London.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
Heathrow in London, but I'm thinking also Chicago. I'm thinking
in O'Hare, yeah.
Yes, at O'Hare. I'm thinking there's the Chicago International, there's Denver International, of course there's New York, and there's Minneapolis. 4 that I can name off at the top
DC,
of my head.
LAX, San Francisco.
Sure,
Yeah, the list goes
absolutely,
on.
Yes. And so I think that those airports in the States specifically, I think they have to. I think that, yes, there's absolutely a need for this new heightened security. And if that means getting to the airport 4 hours earlier now, then that's what it means. For the safety of ourselves and others, I don't know why you wouldn't.
And what about sporting events, too? You probably would think that it would end up being the case.
You would, yes, absolutely, you would think so. I don't know exactly what that would entail. Would it be similar to airport security, where it's a metal detector going through everything now? It won't be nearly as simple as just opening a bag and going, here, you can look through it, because I'm sure you can find ways to hide numerous objects. And so will there be more security? I think yes. Like I said, I don't know why there wouldn't be, especially what's happened. Think about just the past year with Charlie Hebdo in Paris as well. I think that there has to be more heightened security, and I think pretty much everywhere you go now, whether that's as simple as traveling or whether it's going to a sporting event, I think that there, yes, will be much more security. And I think also while you're in Europe, because I think when we were on Delayed Game, I mentioned this, but when you finally get to Europe, traveling is the easiest thing. Security is kind of non-existent, and I think that's why Europe is a pretty big target when it comes to like on the ground attacks. And so I went to Spain for the weekend, and my passport did not get checked. My luggage just got looked at to make sure that I only had 2. But it was very, very simple. And so I think that those people that have been to Europe and have traveled through Europe know what I'm talking about. And I think that they would agree with me that will most likely be changed as well. That there will be, maybe it won't be as extensive as the States, but it will definitely get to that next level.
Amsley Senkbeil joining us. Before we let you go, Amsley, just one last question with just the general perspective of sports and politics. And I failed to ask Michael Snow this, and I kind of know his response because I know Michael doesn't really enjoy politics either, like I do. But is it a good thing or a bad thing when politics and real life events mix in with sports? Because we have seen it in so many ways with the Tour de France and Lance Armstrong, just recently with the Russian doping scandal with the Olympics. in the NFL, Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, Adrian Peterson, etc. We see stuff, the Louisville situation in college basketball, the Penn State situation in college football. We've seen just about everything in every sport, even in baseball, get affected by some sort of outside, open to politics coming in and affecting it type of scenario. Is it good or is it bad when sports and politics mix together?
Well, I'd kind of like to hear your answer because I'm not sure.
I don't enjoy it, but at the same time,
do you think it's kind of needed? Because I think that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, it sheds a light that these athletes, they're human,
right,
like the rest of us. They make bad decisions, just like every one of us also makes. We make a bad decision in some aspect of our life, wherever it may be. These athletes do the same. Some of them do, some of them don't.
Right.
But that's I guess, like I said, I don't enjoy it.
But it's almost that middleman that is needed.
Yeah. And to keep things real, to let us know that sports is not free of bad things happening.
Yeah. I can completely agree with that. I think we've had many conversations about people getting involved maybe when they shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And both of us don't like seeing that because sometimes the one party affected just needs to figure it out themselves. But when it's situations like this where you need that middleman to come in and to let everyone know that one, everything's okay, but two, like you said, that they're human as well. I think that yes, that it is needed.
Sports isn't invincible to real life
no
events.
Matter how many people want to believe that it is, that it's the all-powerful, it's not. And that, unfortunately, sports gets involved in a lot of messy situations that we just wish that it wouldn't. But yeah, I think that politics is needed. No matter how much or how badly we don't want to see them get involved, the way that they do get involved most of the times is in a positive light because they solve the issue and they make us realize that, like you said, sports isn't invincible.
And it frustrates us to a certain extent because of, each scenario is different.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a reminder that sports, it's a fantasy that's not really a fantasy. Yeah. And that really is it's brought about in a big way when something political or something that's in a negative way or in a negative light, whatever it is that's in a bad way, gets involved. It shines the reality spotlight on things and says that sports is not invincible to these things. Amsley Senkbeil, great stuff as always. Glad to have you on the podcast. Amsley Senkbeil, she works for 1011, also for KRNU as well, graduating in literally a month from now, I think, right? You've got a month left.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Oh my goodness, a month and 2 days.
Yeah, there you go. Somebody's really excited for that.
I am. I'm also a little nervous, but I have a feeling that graduation and moving on to my next step will just bring an array of adventures and possibilities, and I'm excited to see what those are and to hopefully conquer and succeed.
By the way, we have not had you on since the baseball season continued.
Yeah,
we might have to. We might have to bring you on for another podcast to discuss the season that was. Maybe in the debut podcast of Delay of Game, we will have you on to discuss the former joke of Delay of Game turned not really a joke anymore
No
after
longer a
this
joke.
season. Yes, that will be some good, entertaining
That's
stuff.
a nice little hand cleaner, but
Yes, absolutely. Amsley, thanks so much for joining us.
Yep, thank you, Ryan, as always.
We will have the Husker Football Podcast also posted today. Be sure to check that out. Facebook.com/TheRoute2 at @the_Route2 on Twitter. And, of course, our website, theroute2.wordpress.com.